Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to APTA's Monday afternoon general session. Please welcome back APTA President and CEO, Paul Skoutelas.
Hey, good afternoon. So how's it going? We had an unbelievable opening session this morning that I hope energized you as much as it did me. Some great session that followed, and we got a terrific session on tap right here for you right now. We're very honored indeed this afternoon to have FTA's Acting Administrator Jane Williams, who's with us. And you know, we've got a very, very strong relationship with FTA and APTA for obvious reasons. They're our prime partner as we begin and continue our efforts to make sure that we're doing the very best to advance our public transportation industry. I have been so impressed with Jane's leadership and just how engaged she has been from the time that I've assumed my role here at APTA. And I know when she assumed her role as acting administrator in August of 2017, she has been nonstop in terms of meeting with our members, communicating with us at APTA. And it's not just Jane, but it's also her staff. I mean, it's incredible the level of engagement, which we really appreciate, and we look forward to continuing as we move forward. Jane and her staff are here in Nashville for these meetings and conference. We're very appreciative for that. It's a commitment that I know she feels dearly about. And after all, she leads a really complex organization, 500 employees, over $13 billion of investment in public transportation each and every year. So she knows our business. Prior to the appointment at FTA, Jane was director of the Washington Area Transit Office in the Maryland Department of Transportation. So she knows firsthand how important federal funding is to helping our state and local governments meet the mobility needs of their citizens, but also how all of our members, our agencies, and our business members really need that funding as well. But she understands the complexities of what it takes to deliver services and deliver projects. Much of Jane's career has been devoted to public service. She's held positions at the Departments of Energy and Labor and Interior in earlier administrations. And again, we always appreciate the opportunity to meet with her and to meet with her senior team, many of whom are here. And we're looking forward to continuing a good, productive dialogue. And it begins today, right here this afternoon. So let's take a quick view of some highlights of FTA, and then we'll be calling up the acting administrator for some comments. So please, let's roll with the video. That's a great video. Love the highlights and love that music as well. Please join me in welcoming Acting Administrator Jane Williams.
If it's meant to be, it'll be, it'll be. Baby, just let it be. If it's meant to be, it'll be, it'll be. Baby, just let it be.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Paul. It is an honor to be here today. Over the past year, I've had the pleasure of meeting so many of you at my roundtables in various FTA regions and at our headquarters in Washington, D.C., and I look forward to more industry roundtables as I travel across the nation. While traveling, I've had the opportunity to ride your buses, your trains, streetcars, and even an inclined plane in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I've seen how important your work is every day to the people you serve on a daily basis, but even more importantly, in times of an emergency. Once again, I stand before you, having spoken to many of you in our regions of our country recovering from the hurricanes, typhoons, or tropical storms. Unfortunately, our partners in the Carolinas are still dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Florence, which has brought historic levels of flooding not seen since Hurricane Floyd in 1999. Thank you to our transit partners who have already provided emergency trips to more than 2,000 people, including providing buses to assist the National Guard efforts. Know that FTA stands ready to assist each and every community touched by this historic storm. Over the past year, FTA has partnered with you to accomplish many of your goals and our shared goal to provide safe, public transportation to America's communities. I'd like to start by highlighting FTA actions to financially support our nation's public transportation systems. In fiscal year 2018, FTA has awarded more than $15 billion in funding through both formula and competitive grant programs to support public transportation. In addition, all of FTA's 2018 notices of funding opportunities for our annual competitive grant programs have been issued. This represents more than $500 million in funding, and many of those grants have already been announced and awarded. Together, we are making a positive and lasting impact in communities across our nation. And so I'm very pleased to share with you that tomorrow, FTA will be able to formally announce more than $366 million in buses and bus facilities infrastructure investment grants to 107 projects in 50 states and territories. This is yet another significant step in achieving this administration's goal of rebuilding our nation's infrastructure. Unfortunately, the administration's efforts to support our nation's infrastructure are many times overlooked by the focus on the Capital Investment Grant Program. I know a lot of you in this room have very strong opinions about the administration's approach toward the CIG program. Even though this program represents less than 20% of FTA's budget, it seems to occupy 80% of the attention. Many of you do not even participate in the CIG program at all. Nevertheless, it is the elephant in the room, so to speak, and one I feel compelled to address. So please indulge me while I point out just a few pertinent facts. Since this administration began on January 20th of 2017, FTA has advanced funding for 13 CIG projects, 2 new starts, 2 core capacities, and 9 small start projects, representing billions of dollars in infrastructure investments across the country. In fact, in just the last 6 weeks, FTA has advanced the LA Purple Line Section 3 project into the engineering phase of the CIG program, signed a $75 million small start grant agreement for the Albuquerque Rapid Transit project, allocated $100 million in funding toward our planned multi-year FFGA for the Seattle-Linwood Link Extension light rail line, and allocated $99 million in funding toward our planned FFGA for Santa Ana, California streetcar project. FTA is working closely with both Sound Transit and Orange County, who are respectively seeking CIG shares of just 37% and 36% of the total project cost. FTA continues to work with both of our grantees on our potential FFGAs. While talking about those projects, I'd like to dispel just a few myths we keep hearing about the CIG program, particularly with regard to the June 2018 Dear Colleague letter that we shared with the industry. One myth is that FTA will use geographic diversity as a mechanism to block funding from going to certain states. Our actions tell a different story. If the Linwood Link and Santa Ana projects receive grant agreements, it will mean that 6 of the 13 grant agreements executed under this administration will be in just 2 states, Washington and California, even though 11 current CIG projects are already under construction in fact, those same 2 states. People in this audience from the other 48 states can reach their own conclusion on whether or not that's appropriate for a nationally competitive discretionary grant program. But clearly, we can all agree that although geographic diversity is a consideration, it certainly hasn't been a barrier to funding. Furthermore, considering geographic diversity when evaluating CIG projects isn't new at FTA. In fact, at APTA's own legislative conference a decade ago, FTA staff used this slide to explain to potential project sponsors how they intended to evaluate projects in light of limited funding. You can see in the first bullet, the geographic diversity was a consideration then as it is now. And you may also notice that the second bullet encourages project sponsors to assume limits on New Start's funding. Again, at APTA's 2010 legislative conference, this next slide was used as part of a very similar FTA presentation. Notice that this time FTA explicitly said that an overmatch is encouraged. Clearly, employing existing statutory discretion to adapt CIG policy is a long-standing bipartisan practice, not unprecedented and certainly not a barrier to funding. And that's exactly what FTA continues to do today. A second myth is that FTA is slow-walking grants and not signing as many FFGAs as in the past. And I ask you, again, look at our actions. By the end of 2018, if both Linwood Link and Santa Ana are ready to be signed, when added to the FFGAs that we've already signed in 2017 for Caltrain and the Maryland Purple Line, this administration will have signed 4 FFGAs in just under 2 years. For the record, there were 3 FFGAs signed in 2016, 2 in 2015, and 2 in 2014. Hardly a case for slow-walking the process. A third myth is that FTA is unwilling to consider a CIG project when it is also seeking a federal loan. Again, our actions tell a different story. In 2017, this administration signed a full funding grant agreement for the Maryland Purple Line that also received a federal TIFIA loan, a loan of over $874 million from DOT's Build America Bureau. The department is currently considering the Linwood Link extension project, which is also seeking a multi-year CIG grant of over $1 billion with a $658 million federal TIFIA loan. I also know that many of you have concerns about FTA's updated risk assessment process, and I'm here today to, again, dispel some myths. FTA's CIG risk assessment process is not, I repeat, not intended to harm projects. Instead, it is based on objective data and extensive analysis of past project outcomes. We have required sponsors to strengthen their financial plans. This ensures taxpayer dollars are spent wisely and cost projections are realistic. The public, our shared constituents, expects us to deliver projects on budget and on time, as we promise. Effective analysis and the mitigation of risk earlier in the CIG process and before FTA locks in the federal contribution is the best path forward for everyone. It's simply good governance. I'd like to commend Los Angeles Metro for their partnership with us in working to implement this new risk assessment process. FTA followed through on our commitment, and we're able to move the LA Purple Line Section 3 project into the engineering phase of the CIG program, with the CIG share, I might add, of only 35%. When it comes to FTA's intent to issue updated CIG policy guidance, FTA is once again following through on the statutory requirement to do so. That does not mean that FTA intends to harm transit agencies with current or proposed projects in the CIG program. What it does mean is that FTA intends to follow the law, update the policy guidance, and be responsive to the feedback we receive. Frankly, this is no different than what all previous administrations have done. Finally, I want to reiterate what Secretary Chow and I have said time and time again. FTA has implemented the CIG program consistent with the law. Congress delegated discretion in implementing the program to the Department of Transportation, and notably, Congress in Title 49, Section 5309, left it to the department to determine recommendations of projects for funding. Now, thank you for allowing me to spend a disproportionate amount of time talking about the CIG program. I recognize it affects a small minority of transit agencies, and that APTA's membership and audience is much broader than that narrow focus. But I felt important that we all have a common understanding of how this administration, the actions we take, and why. Now, let's turn to how FTA is working with you to meet all of your needs. FTA partners with you in delivering mobility choices to the American people. And as your partner, we want to make sure we're not placing undue burdens on you through our own rules, regulations, and practices. Secretary Chow in this administration is leading the charge to reduce unnecessary regulations that may impede projects and drive up costs. She joined more than a dozen federal agencies in signing the President's One Federal Decision Memorandum of Understanding, which provides a more predictable, transparent, and timely process for federal review and authorization of major capital projects. With a single federal agency taking the lead on the permitting process, our goal is to be able to issue approvals within just 2 years. We have proven that we can reduce regulatory burden without sacrificing safety or rigorous financial oversight by taking a risk-based approach. Last year at APTA Expo 2017, I noticed that FTA would begin using risk-based reporting for our grants under $2 million, allowing grantees who used to report quarterly to report just once annually. And I am very proud to report that this approach has reduced your burden of reporting by 37%, eliminating 4,300 reports each quarter, and not to mention the thousands and thousands of hours of staff time by you and FTA as well. And so we will continue to look for ways to lessen the burden we place on you so that you can keep your focus appropriately on the people that you serve every day. For instance, under a new policy we recently highlighted in our apportionment notice, we increased the threshold from $500,000 to $1 million for real estate acquisitions, dispositions, or property condemnations, which must be submitted to us for review. This change will reduce the industry's burden by 20%. And so we're excited to be able to do these things and partner with you to make your life just a little bit easier. Our most important partnership, I would argue, is in the form of safety. And we are proud to partner in keeping public transportation safe throughout our entire country. It is our #1 priority. And we believe it's best to focus our efforts on the systems and services that present the highest risk. That's why FTA is taking a risk-based approach to safety oversight. We recently, as all of you know, published our 2 final safety rules, which complete the foundation for a new era in transit safety. The Public Transportation Agency safety plans will become the cornerstone of transit safety, one that's flexible enough to serve transit systems of different types and different compositions. In focusing on recipients of urbanized area formula funds who operate a public transportation system, these safety plans will cover 97% of the more than 10 billion trips taken in the U.S. each year. The remaining 3% of trips are provided by literally thousands of small transit agencies who, data shows us, pose a much lower safety risk. And during the comment period, we heard from many of you, many of the small operators asking for some reduction in the financial and administrative burdens of complying with this rule. We listened, and we right-sized our approach. I am very proud of our partnership over the last year in establishing the state safety oversight programs. As you know, there are 31 programs across our country that must be established and certified by April 15th of next year. And I am very happy to report that Missouri has become the 25th state to achieve FTA certification. Do we have representatives from Missouri in the House? When I spoke to you at this time last year, only one state, the state of Ohio, had been certified. So congratulations to Ohio, being the first in the nation. We continue to work with the remaining 6 programs to bring every single one of them across the finish line. Thank you to each of you for sharing your knowledge and best practices to ensure that rail transit remains safe. Just as we've worked with these states to put SSO programs in place, we have already begun to partner with you in the same way as you establish your safety plans. We believe that empowering you at the local level leads to not only safer transit service, but also to innovations that might not otherwise surface. That's why I'm happy to say that FTA will soon be announcing a new public safety in transit initiative. It'll provide $4 million in research grants and technical assistance funding for projects to improve safety, including preventing crime, human trafficking, and operator assaults. Even as many of you have been working on these issues, there remains a lot to be done. And together, we can drive safety innovation forward. The Department of Homeland Security provides some of the oversight of transit safety, but their main focus, of course, is on counterterrorism. As a result, much of the burden falls to local and transit police. FTA looks forward to partnering with you in developing effective practices to address criminal activity in all of our transit systems. Keeping our riders and our workers safe is all of our priority. In addition, Secretary Child recently prioritized the prevention of human trafficking across all modes of transportation. I was honored to represent the United States at the International Transport Forum this summer, and by serving on a panel discussing the safety and security of women in public transportation. All of these experiences have inspired this new effort, and I look forward to innovative solutions we can share across the country that keep our riders and our workers safe. Finally, FTA has always approached innovation as an area to leverage our partnership, which is critical as we prepare for the future. It is such an exciting time to be in the field of transportation. New practices and technology will change our industry, perhaps in ways that we have yet to even imagine. The future is exciting, but as we look back at our past, we can recognize that Transit 1.0 was an era in which transit was largely private and unfortunately failed. Transit 2.0 is today a public entity supported by local, state, and federal funding. What Transit 3.0 will look like is yet to be defined, but it's an opportunity for all of us to shape. That's why FTA's Mobility on Demand initiative strikes to look beyond mode while exploring promising new mobility concepts, technologies, and solutions, ones that will greatly enhance the personal mobility of millions of Americans. There's been remarkable growth in the number of partnerships formed between transit agencies and private mobility providers. Prior to 2010, there were only 3 partnerships, and today there are more than 40, and that number continues to grow. In 2017, FTA directed $8 million to 11 demonstration projects across the nation through the MOD Sandbox to explore innovative partnerships between traditional transit operators and new mobility providers. For example, in BART in San Francisco, they're working on a Scoop app. This matches carpool passengers going to the same station at the same time, which guarantees a parking space at an otherwise sold-out transit parking facility. This helps address a regional transit facility parking problem and encourages people to use public transportation. In Pinellas County, Florida, they're working on showing how ADA-mandated paratransit services can be transformed to give people with disabilities reliable, efficient, and effective transportation that meets each of their own individual needs. By integrating services from Lyft, taxi providers, and wheelchair-accessible services into one platform, PSTA riders will have expanded options, including multiple trips during the day that are timed to fit their own unique needs. We're also using innovation to make transit safer for its workers. FTA is partnering with a number of transit agency and technology vendors across the country to develop, test, and validate right-of-way worker protection systems. These systems are meant to act as secondary protection, providing advance warning to wayside workers about an approaching train, notifying train operators of the presence of workers on the tracks, and helping rail control centers monitor their location. Systems currently in testing include one developed by ProTran Incorporated that is currently being tested at my favorite, WMATA in Washington, D.C., and another from Bombardier that is being deployed in MARTA in Atlanta. One thing we know we will not change is the future need for collaboration. From its establishment 50 years ago as the Urban Mass Transportation Administration to the FTA of today, partnership has been at the core of each and every success. In closing, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my FTA leadership team and staff. Many of them are here today, and many of you have been meeting with them. Although I've only worked with them for a relatively short period of time, I recognize many of you have worked with them for years. I know you already realize how valuable and dedicated they are to public transportation. They are serious about serving the American people and willing to be adaptable and consider new approaches. It's an honor for me to work with each of them every single day. Thank you again, and I look forward to continuing our meetings with you.
Administrator Williams, thank you so much for sharing that information with us and the perspectives on the Federal Transit Program. I certainly want to say on behalf of APTA and our membership that we believe continuing dialogue is essential. We appreciate, again, the candid manner that you are working with us, your full engagement, your presence here, and the many meetings that I know that you have conducted during the course of our time here in Nashville. We stand committed to continue to work together because I think our goals are really common, and that is how can we best meet the needs of our communities across the country in terms of investments in public transportation. So thank you again. Please join me in thanking Administrator Williams for her time, her intellect, and her contributions today and this afternoon. So that brings to a close another session. We've got a whole plethora of sessions that are going to be starting up here very shortly. So I would please encourage you to attend and make your choices of some great sessions that are available to you. Thanks for your participation today. Thank you.